Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Floridian Sports Podcast. Today, marking the week since the beginning of free agency for the NBA, and the Miami Heat have been working around the clock for the past week. The brink of night, Pat Riley in the office in South Beach, and Eric Spoelstra overseas in Tokyo with Team USA for the Olympics have been on phone lines, have been communicating with everybody, and been getting a team assembled. This is a real team Miami have gotten from being a first round sweep to possibly being contender for the title this year of a top three team in the East for contention. And how did they do it? How did they even get the money for it? I mean, this Heat team was very much on limited space in the cap. Of course, there's been a lot of sign and trade deals that Pat Riley has done in the past, which he mimics in this year. However, the names are a little bit bigger. And going straight into the Heat free agency, I just want to let you know this is probably somebody that the Miami Heat were expecting 3 days prior to the beginning of free agency. However, it wasn't official until a couple of days because there was a little bit of investigation of tampering between Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. That's right. The Miami Heat were able to get Kyle Lowry out of Toronto, the 35-year-old All-Star. He goes to the Miami Heat, and we ended up doing a sign and trade deal, sending Goran Dragic and Precious, the second-year big, who had a really outstanding showcase in Tokyo for the Olympics on Team Nigeria. They're both going to Toronto with a future second-round pick. Now, this is a good trade just because if you want to win right now, this is the trade to win right now. Kyle Lowry, he brings a lot of things to the table, especially things you didn't really see much of the Heat doing in the playoff this year. He brings in a consistency on offense. To give you an example on some notes right now, we're talking about a guy 43% from the field goal range, and then 40 from three-point, which is really consistent considering that there were some slumps from Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero at three. And I don't even think there was a time where they were making more than 30% from the three. So this is a huge move for them on consistency offensively. He's a great leader, can run down the ball very well. Not much of a playmaker, more of a shooter as most. And then the championship leadership. This guy's been to the NBA Finals, won a ring himself in 2019 with the Toronto Raptors, and been part of some of the most passionate and aggressive playoff games as well as series. The one that really comes to mind, besides, of course, the legacy of the 2019 run by the Toronto Raptors with Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard and going against the 76ers in that game 7 and then next up to the Bucks, beat him in 6. 2020, in the bubble against the Boston Celtics. This man was about averaging more than 40 minutes a game, putting most of it on the line for his team. So this is a guy that I expect to not only be there for the Heat, but as well be there when it matters. So this is a really great pickup. However, the one thing I would say that's negative about it is just that he's 35. The deal itself is a 3-year deal, about $90 million, and it's all fully guaranteed. No matter if it's injury, no matter if we trade him later on, $90 million fully guaranteed. So he's being paid $30 million a year till he's 39, almost 40 years old. So if we don't get a championship within those next couple of years, it might be because of his age deteriorating his game. And no matter what happens, he's gonna be safe in his paycheck. I mean, this is $90 million fully guaranteed. So you can't really say that, oh, but Lowry has nothing guaranteed, so he has to stay with the Heat. He doesn't have to stay with the Heat. However, he needs to perform if he wants to get a ring, and this is probably the only chance he gets if he wants to get a second ring. Now, you're probably also asking of how did they do this deal? I mean, of course, very limited money. Well, let me go straight into the notes right here. We're talking about Miami. They picked up Dragic's team option, which is about $19.5 million. Then after that, they bypassed Andre Iguodala's $15 million. So the Heat were in place to not only pick up Lowry, but they were below and within the NBA salary cap, which is insane just to think. I mean, the math they do in that building, it's got to be like some people from NASA. I mean, I just can't even think of how they even do this stuff, especially with Jimmy Butler. When he came out of Philadelphia over here on sign trade, we sent Richardson over there. And speaking of Jimmy Butler, he got a huge pay raise. That's right. We extended his contract, literally the first move within the first 30 minutes of free agency. Jimmy Butler, I mean, here's the details of his max contract extension. He'll be signing with the Heat. He'll be there for 2025. It's going to be 4 years, 184 million. So in other words, next year he has a raise of 4.5 million dollars on his contract, and an overall in 1 year he'll be making 40.5 million in that 1 year. Now, this is good because, he is the bread and butter of this team. He's a huge factor of how the chemistry is built in the locker room. But one thing I'm really considering about this deal, though, it's some type of security blanket. If the Miami Heat can figure out a way to include Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler offensively, I feel like he's going to continue getting career numbers. I mean, Jimmy Butler in points, let alone not career light, but still 20 plus average in points per game. He had a career high in rebounds per game, 7.1 to be exact. And then he leads the lead last season in steals, 2.1. Almost 7 assists, let alone to a factor of that. So if you ask me, this is kind of Jimmy Butler is not only going to elevate his game, but he's going to elevate his stats as well. Because I can't imagine Kyle Lowry taking down the ball over Jimmy Butler. And I know how that sounds like, but I think in Eric Spoelstra's system, Kyle Lowry would be used more like a spot-up shooter, somebody that's more consistent when you need the basket, with some of the guys have not, been up to par, which had cost us games back in last season, especially with Duncan Robinson missing a lot here, and then Tyler Hero just having a sophomore slump. I expect him to rebound this year, but if not, Kyle Lowry's right there to fix up the job. And speaking of shooters, Duncan Robinson, he ends up re-signing with the Heat. And this was a guy that everybody thought there's no way we're going to be able to pay for him. There's no way we're able going to keep him being one of the most lethal shooters in the NBA right now at a young age he is in his career. However, Pat Riley finds some ridiculous numbers and he does this. We're talking about a 5-year deal, $90 million. $90 million on a 5-year deal. If you do not know, that is the most money given to a player on a contract in the NBA who have been undrafted. An undrafted kid, think about it, about 3 or so years, he was just trying to start up his own podcast or whatever, trying to just to be in sports. Now he's getting paid $90 million as an undrafted player. So it's a huge, great story for him. However, it's probably a bigger story for the Miami Heat just to keep him there. I mean, it's a little bit of security at 3. And, what I mentioned with keeping guys with the Heat, they did keep somebody else with the Heat. And this was a low risk, high reward. Well, potential high reward if this worked out for Victor Oladipo. Victor Oladipo gets on a veteran minimum deal. He'll be there for the Miami Heat next season. And this is kind of a deal where, you don't really need to have him start right away or play games right away. He hasn't really been since his injury. But he's still 29. 29 years old on a 1-year deal. You can remake whatever after this season. Of course, Lowry's still going to be there. Duncan's still going to be there. Jimmy Butler's going to still be there. A lot of guys on your roster right now are still going to be there. And if Victor Oladipo does well, you could possibly use that free agency to make him a new deal that's worthy of his game, or whatever he plays like. And if he doesn't play well, who knows? He might re-sign again for another veteran minimum. However, a guy that young at his age, still working towards not his prime, but his better years, it's great to have him at least on the roster. And speaking of guys that have on the roster, PJ Tucker also joins the Miami Heat right after winning a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks. So that's another guy, championship experience. And actually, believe it or not, he was teammates with Kyle Lowry back in 2016, 2017. So this is kind of a reunion for the two. Now, this is a 2-year deal, about $15 million. It's not a bad deal at all in the sense of how this team ethic is. I know that people are talking about this team being a football team. It's going to be a really aggressive practice. It's going to be guys knocking the crap out of each other. But this is, PJ Tucker has evolved in his defensive game. He isn't getting called a lot of fouls more than he usually does. He's more, less tempered. Maybe with this ring, now he wants to build somewhere else. And Miami is definitely a great spot. Compared to Milwaukee, it's a huge spot. Now, this could also help because it's another stop for Giannis. It's another stop for Kevin Durant. And of course, he isn't like to be on the same level of their caliber. But defensively, that's somebody you can trust. If Jimmy Butler is not playing that, defense well against Oladipo, taking him inside all the time, PJ Tucker right there has the width and size on his shoulders to just slide in there and at least put a body on somebody. I mean, not even that. You got to go against the Brooklyn Nets sometime this season. You don't want to have Jimmy Butler going back and forth between James Harden and then Kevin Durant. You want to have someone that's at least, one assigned for the entire duration of the entire game. That's PJ Tucker going to be on Durant the entire time. And I expect Jimmy Butler and James Harden, a great matchup to see with Harden's offense and Jimmy Butler's aggressive defensive ethics. So this is a great move for the Heat defensively. Offensively, I have some questions about it just because he's more or less used as a spot-up shooter, even though he doesn't really have the shot for it, to be considered for it at least. So besides that, the last bit that happened for free agency so far this week, we did bring back some guys. Just to name a couple, Dwayne Dedmon, Gabe Vincent, who I expect to step up a lot this year with, of course, the departure of Dragic as well as Kendrick Nunn, and Max Strus, another guy who, you have some potential at. I think he's in the summer league right now, which I expect to do an episode later on this week about for the Miami Heat. They had just finished their California Classic, did a really well job defending off the Lakers summer league team, who has a couple of interesting characters, not like high draft picks, but interesting characters at least. Now, these deals are basically friendly low prices. Of course, Dwayne Dedmon is not going to be some guy that's going to ask for a huge number, let alone the other two who are still trying to prove themselves on an NBA roster. But they're huge to our NBA roster. Dwayne Dedmon, he's an efficient scorer off the bench. He plays really well at the front court. If you want to put him with Bam, I thought he was going to be well with Bam in the playoffs. However, now you can have PJ Tucker at the 4, so he'll be a great guy coming off for the bench if Bam gets tired or gets fouled out or whatever it is. He's a great player to have on the bench for consistency offensively and overall just another big to have with a team full of guards. Gabe Vincent, of course, as I said before, I want him to step forward. He'd probably get more than 10 to 15 minutes on the rotation. I don't know where he is going to be used in Eric Spoelstra's system this year, especially with, I'm guessing, Duncan Robinson 25-plus minutes. However, I hope to see a lot of him. And Max Strus, there's not a lot to say. I mean, he'll still be on the team, but I can't imagine him getting more than 5 minutes. The man averaged about 6 points in 10 minutes. So we're talking about a guy that's probably going to still stay in the low numbers, but still great to have on the roster. But in overall, there's not a lot of guys left to sign for the Miami Heat in this year's free agency. I know Dennis Schroeder's name has been brought up here and there. Pascal Siakam might do a sign and trade somewhere else, but those are the only two names that I can imagine the Heat would even think of considering on the roster. So the rest will probably be, they'll probably be from the Summer League. And of course, I'll get back to you with another video coming up very soon. This is the end of it all. I hope that I answered a lot of questions or anything like that for this year's Heat free agency in the NBA. If you liked anything about the video, please leave a comment. If you have any critics about the video, please leave a like and comment. I mean, if anything, please subscribe. I do this as much as I can. So it's just a building process, especially like these Heat. They're building right now a championship roster. So I want to thank you for joining in today, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thank you.